All right, I'm delighted to say we're joined in studio by a bona fide Scottish legend, a Grand Slam winner, British and Irish Lions legend as well, Gavin Hastings. Thanks a lot for joining us in the studio.
Lovely to be here.
What are you here promoting?
Well, obviously, I think that special affinity between Scots and Irish rugby fans, and obviously, any game between the two Celtic sets of supporters, it's always guaranteed to be a great occasion and lots of bonhomie around the rugby match.
Yeah.
And
the big Guinness sign is a giveaway.
Well, you mentioned it. I just drink it.
What you hear then is that Paddy Cullen's in Ballsbridge, they're basically turning it Scottish, which I think is a very nice gesture.
Well, very much so.
In fact, it's almost overly welcoming.
It's going to be called the Flower of Scotland pub, isn't it, for the weekend? So that's fantastic, and I'm sure hundreds of Scottish fans will venture into the bars of Dublin pre-match and obviously post-match as well. But, like I say, I think there is a special relationship between both sets of supporters, and I've always had some wonderful times here in Dublin.
Well, he always won.
Back in the day, I tell you what, we've been paying for it ever since. But sure, there's a bit more optimism coming into Saturday's game than there's been probably for a number of years.
That friendliness between the two sets of supporters, was it a very different atmosphere on the pitch when you were playing Ireland, say, compared to when you were playing England?
You could say that, but look, you always have a will to win, I think, and a desire to win, and it was no different back in the years that I played as it is now. I think the one thing that I'd say, obviously, with the Pro 14 is that the players know each other very, very well. I mean, I played 10 years of international rugby, and it was probably only after your fourth or fifth year, because you only saw the guys and played against them once a year. So you needed to play against them 3 or 4 times before you felt that you were becoming friends. But of course, nowadays it's great. You have no pressure. You come along and you do have a couple of pints before the game, and it's great because there's no pressure on you.
Yeah, the whole England thing then and the rivalry, it really did blow up over the last couple of weeks with what happened with Eddie Jones, and you found yourself right in the centre of it. If anyone missed it, and I don't think they did, your comments before the game, I was just again reading them back earlier, where you did say you admired Eddie Jones for what he had achieved, but as a supporter of one of his opponents, you just want to rub his face in the dirt. Well, now, you didn't. I'm assuming you didn't mean that literally.
No, of course not. And, it was just, it's not really something that I want to talk about. I think Eddie Jones handled it very, very well. And it was an unfortunate incident. But I guess you get that if you're in the public eye. But, let's move on from there. I think it's important to go on from there and concentrate on the good things that happened in the rugby field, which, of course, 2 weeks ago was a wonderful day for Scottish rugby.
Well, that's the thing. It was such an incredible victory. The one thing I did wonder was, because you obviously now are going to games looking at it differently, and maybe the way people look at rugby figures and public figures is very different to how it was 20, 25 years ago, that they feel if Eddie Jones is on a train, it's like he's public property. People can say whatever they want. And you're going to games now watching your son play for Glasgow, and I wonder if you've noticed that maybe people in the crowd's attitude is different going to a game, that they feel they can say more, they can be more critical.
I don't know, it's a very good point, and I think social media brings its own challenges as well, and clearly when everything, there's no hiding place now, and when people are out celebrating sets of players after the game, then you just never know, and so I think the players have to be, and indeed people in my position, you have to be more sensitive to that, and occasionally things happen and you have no control over them, and that's the way it is, but obviously we move on and we look forward to Saturday's game.
Yeah, I'd imagine everyone in Scotland is in pretty good humour right now. Back-to-back wins over England, France, particularly over the last 15, 20 years, don't come around too often.
No, you're right, and I think it's always a curious thing when you do, you've got 3 away matches, and yet in the second and third weekends you have your two home matches, and then obviously Scotland are finishing off with a game here in Dublin, and then looking forward to Rome next week. So, certainly from where we were sort of just under 4 weeks ago after the Welsh game to it's amazing, that Scotland have turned around what was a massive, massive disappointment in Cardiff to being in a pretty optimistic mood coming into Saturday's match, and that's all down to their play and the fact that they put two pretty decent sides to the sword at Murrayfield, and we just have to improve our away form now, don't we?
Yeah, it's been some very difficult years for Scottish rugby. Haven't won a championship since it became the Six Nations at the turn of the century, over a quarter of a century since the last Grand Slam. Is this as confident, as optimistic you've been about Scottish rugby in the interim?
I think there's no doubt that this is the best Scottish team we've had for an awful long time, and the fact that we do have some genuinely classy players in the team, and particularly in the backs. I think Greg Laidlaw's come in and he's really been a foundation stone for Scotland, and John Barclay has had some superb games of late, and he's just matured into a very robust and all-round competent player and a very good captain. And you have the sort of slightly mercurial talents of Finn Russell there at 10, and quite a contrast to Johnny Sexton, I think, at standoff, and it'll be a fascinating battle. And clearly, the battle of Ford and Finn Russell a fortnight ago, and obviously with Owen Farrell there as well. It was a very interesting challenge, and the same applies, I think, for Saturday. So I'm very much looking forward to that. I think Stuart Hogg can be the match winner if Scotland are going to win on Saturday, and I think we
As
really
he was
need
last year.
Well, he was indeed, and that in itself was terrific, and Finn Russell very much at the heart of a lot of the good stuff as well. So, we're not going to catch Ireland. No one's going to say, well, probably caught them a bit cold last year at the start of the Six Nations, but they'll be certainly ready for anything, I'm sure, that Scotland throw at them. But equally, I'm glad that we've had a week off from the England game and been able to sort of recharge the batteries and focus in on the specific talents that Ireland are going to pose.
You mentioned Finn Russell there, and so much of what was good about Scotland came through Finn Russell against England. At the same time, the opening day against Wales, he got huge criticism after it for his performance. You mentioned the word mercurial. When you think back to, say, when his head coach now, Gregor Townsend, made the breakthrough, would you see any similarities between the two of them?
I'd see lots of them, actually. And, I think good players, respond to a bit of criticism. I think Finn Russell, he plays rugby with a smile on his face, and it's wonderful to see. And you look at Johnny Sexton, and it looks as though it's all very, very serious for Sexton, and he's a wonderful rugby player, and the way that Ireland have played their rugby and become very competent in everything that they do, and the confidence that they have, and you look back to their victory in Paris when they had the 41 phases of possession, and he had the confidence and the ability to strike that beautiful goal from 10 yards inside the French half. And just for that Irish team to go through these phases just shows that they are very, very competent in what they do, whereas I don't think Scotland will be capable of going through that many phases, and they need to probably try something after 10 or 12 phases. So, that's going to be an interesting contrast in styles between, Joe Schmidt being pretty, fundamental in getting the basics right, and Gregor playing rugby with a bit more laissez-faire attitude, I would suggest.
Do you sense then that maybe with Finn Russell that we're going to see over the next 2-3 years that he, and maybe going to wrestling, this isn't going to be the case, that he becomes more Johnny Sexton-esque, that he loses part of that game, that he becomes a little bit more reliable?
I hope not, and genuinely I say that because rugby still has that ability for people of different takes on the way that the game is played, and Finn, it's like, I love seeing sports men and women playing with smiles on their faces, and because if you give the impression that you're enjoying yourself, invariably you do. And I think Finn's a breath of fresh air to rugby. And to be able to play with a smile on your face in the hotbed of international rugby is not an easy thing to do. And yet when things go right, as they did against England, then it's even more joyful to watch. So, I'm not going to criticise him because that's just the way that he is. And that's not to criticise Johnny Sexton as well, because he's developed into a tremendously competitive player, and he's a winner, Johnny Sexton. He always has been, he always will be. He's out of the Owen Farrell mould, and that's the way that he plays, and clearly it suits Irish rugby to have a guy like Johnny Sexton in that position at standoff, and he really is the controller for everything that is good about the Irish team. But there's no doubt that Finn Russell, by contrast, he can make things happen from a Scottish perspective, and that's where there's an interesting contrast to the styles that they play.
Do you almost then just go with Finn Russell heading towards the 2019 World Cup, and you work with him on the understanding that he's going to gain experience, so that there'll be more of the type of performance you get against England? He'll be able to pick and choose his moments, and that he learns the lesson that really in Test match rugby you're certainly not going to get away with what you get away with in Pro 14, and even probably November internationals.
No, I appreciate that, and yet, he played against the second best team in the world a fortnight ago and was outstanding, and he saw the gaps. And I do maintain that he's one of the best passers of a rugby ball, particularly left to right. And he's got wonderful control with his passing, and he can really zip the ball, as he showed last year in passing to Stuart Hogg, and Hoggy scoring his tries. So I think he has a lot of talent. I mean, if he can take anything out of Johnny's book, it is his quality of kicking out of hand with Sexton's, who I think has become a very accomplished kicker out of hand and putting the ball into space. And I think if there was one criticism that I'd level against Finn Russell, it would be if he can just keep working from his kicking out of hand, then he will become a very accomplished player. But you don't become that player overnight, and you have to learn, and game by game and Six Nations year on Six Nations year, you do become hardened to the rigours of full-blooded Test match rugby.
Does he learn more then from the defeat against Wales to the win against England?
Unquestionably, he learns more about the defeat, and he realises that things are not going to work all the time, but you've got to choose. But there was something about that Wales defence, and Wales were no slouches in that game, and they've had two very close games in the meantime, and who knows what would have happened if the game against Ireland had gone on another 10 minutes a fortnight ago. So I don't think Wales are there are no slouches in the game of international rugby, and no one really gives them a hiding. And they might not win all their games, but they can be competitive right up to the last 5 or 10 minutes. And that's where I want Scotland to be, particularly in their away matches. If they can be in that game, then you've got to learn from that. You don't want to be out of touch at half time like almost we were in Cardiff. So, we held in against France, and we came good in the last 20 minutes. We obviously got off to a good lead against England and managed to maintain that, and probably even move somewhat ahead, and frustrated England. And, if we can be somewhat frustrating against Ireland, then we're going to have a chance, unquestionably, heading into the last 15 minutes or so, still in with a chance of victory. Yeah,
it's going to be such an interesting dynamic in the way that you'd assume Ireland are going to try and slow the ball down at times, and Ireland, particularly conceding 3 tries in back-to-back Six Nations games and still managing to win both of them is rather unusual. That's where Ireland's weakness is. That's where Scotland have been just sensational at times. The temptation must be to go for Scotland as if it is a home game, to really attack Ireland in those areas.
Well, I think Scotland will certainly try and do that. From an Irish perspective, I think they'll unquestionably try and dominate up front, and my worry is that they perhaps go out and do that. I mean, I was at Scotstoun watching Glasgow versus Leinster in the Champions Cup a few weeks ago, and Leinster just dominated from start to finish. Sexton had a magnificent game, and he just controlled the areas in which Ireland played in, and then they just had this driving line-out maul that was unstoppable. So that's my one worry, that if Ireland really get in a roll and force Scotland in the back foot and create this pressure in the Scotland's 22, that they could just steamroller Scotland, and then they do get 2 or 3 tries there, and I think if Ireland were to get 20 points up, then they're just going to coast away from Scotland the way that Wales did.
Yeah, whatever about this weekend, hopes must be high heading into a World Cup in 2019 under Gregor Townsend, what he's already done with Glasgow, but the way that they're coming to an end of a transition period, it seems, very quickly with Scotland, that they're 18 months out from a World Cup. They're in a pretty good position.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how things develop, and obviously Ireland in the same pool as Scotland and also the host Japan, and I think that in itself is going to create a huge amount of excitement, not only amongst the Scottish and Irish fans, but also the Japanese fans as well, and the fact that we will have, sellouts in those games. So, yeah, I mean, I think we've got to go on to the next level whereby we can be competitive away from home. Obviously, the last 2 away games, against England and against Wales, we got absolutely mullered. And I'd like to think that we learnt from last year's defeat at Twickenham and put that to good use a fortnight ago against England. And what we have to do going into Saturday is learn from the most recent away defeat, which obviously was in Cardiff a few weeks ago. So, I have a feeling that Scotland will be a lot more robust than they were down in Cardiff, and will be more prepared to take on the unique challenges that Ireland pose. For Gregor, I hope he has 1 or 2 things up his sleeve, and but Joe Schmidt is a very, very competent coach, and probably the best coach in world rugby, and he's really got Ireland playing to a tremendous formula that makes it very difficult for teams to play against and for teams to win.
I mentioned your son Adam earlier on. He's still, 21?
21, aye.
One of Finn Russell's backups at Glasgow as an out half. Finn Russell's going to Racing, so he should get an opportunity. Pro 14 Champions Cup. Are you thinking already of you the flights booked to Japan next year?
Well, I've been at every World Cup since the start, so I see no reason not to go. But look, there's a lot of young talent coming through, and I think Scotland has its fair share of young talent. The trouble is that we've only got 2 outlets for that in Glasgow and Edinburgh, and Ireland clearly have got your 4 provincial sides. So I think that's the challenge, that is to give all these young up-and-coming players enough game time, and but we'll see how things progress, and I don't really know.
Do you give him a critical analysis after every game?
I ask him if he's enjoyed himself. It's the most important thing for anyone. I think if you're playing sport to a pretty high level, you've got to have fun doing it. Take a leaf out of Finn Russell's book and play with a smile on your face, and just enjoy what you're doing. And I know the enjoyment comes from winning, but professional sport being what it is, you can't win necessarily every game. But have a smile on your face. I think that's a pretty good message, isn't it?
Had you a smile on your face when you left Augusta recently? I don't think anyone's ever played Augusta and not left with a smile on their face.
Yeah, I would suggest that was pretty good as well. I'm lucky. I get some opportunities that through having had the opportunity to meet a lot of people around the world. Then that's what it's all about.
That's a nice perk. What you shoot?
83 or 4.
Here you take it.
I'll take it.
How were the greens rolling?
They were rolling pretty good.
Oof.
I saw Rory there. He's in good form.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I've got my money on Rory.
Well,
come on, Rory.
Very good. Interesting. A little bit of insight there. Gavin, you've been very good with your time. Thanks a lot for coming in. I know you have a busy afternoon. Gavin Hastings has been with us with thanks to Guinness. They're turning Paddy Cullen's in Ballsbridge into the flower of Scotland. They're going to welcome Scottish fans and the Irish supporters as well ahead of the game on Saturday.